Well, we want to thank everyone who's able to join us today, this afternoon. We've got, my name is Jorge Chang. I'm a member of the New York City chapter of the Jericho movement. We're a organization that is committed to supporting and um, supporting the release and freedom of political prisoners throughout the United States. These are folks who were in self-determination struggles, as well as struggles to protect their communities and their land, and were incarcerated for those reasons. And so, um, you know, so the Jericho movement is very honored to have our guest speaker today. Um, um, we've got Lenny Foster of the Dene Nation, who's the former director of the Navajo Nation Corrections Project, and the spiritual advisor to more than 2,000 Native American inmates in 96 state and federal prisons in the Western U.S. He's co-authored legislation in New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, allowing Native Americans spiritual and religious practice in prison and resulting in significant reductions in
Yes.
prison returns. He's also a board member of the International Indian Treaty Council, a sun dancer, and a member of the Native
That's
American
the
Church.
problem with Facebook.
Uh,
So,
he's
it
been
looks
with
great.
the
Yeah.
American Indian movement since 1969.
Okay, great.
He has
Thank
participated
you.
in actions including Alcatraz, Last Black Mesa, The Trail of Broken Treaties, Wounded Knee, The Longest Walk, the Mountain Land Struggle, as well as many other struggles. Lenny Foster has received many accolades and honors for his groundbreaking work with indigenous prisoners, human rights, and has testified many times at the UN on both indigenous issues and the political prisoner Leonard Peltier. Lenny Foster, I just want to welcome you. Um, and the floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you. Are you able to hear me?
Absolutely, yes.
You can see me. It's not too dark. I can open the shades a little bit if that helps. Otherwise, I'll leave those shades alone behind me. I'm at home here in
Very good.
Scottsdale, Arizona.
Yeah, you.
I want to thank you. And by way of introduction, I would like to do that in my Dene way. So bear with me as I speak Dene here for introduction purposes, and it's important to do that at all times when you're speaking to a crowd and introducing yourself. So yeah, lang hidini do shibina sikeda nkhini so ado dan sin of time the yat don jindo hehen hidini do don nen shlinige ki an shlin sat an basische tobai da shiche and the rani da shinal kot ana be khon shlon di khon kodo chao so ho yero ado yisna sha idi ko ho wada Other in kitchen Habitsishito near Jericho annual gathering conference based out of New York City. Ikut ari kung kudo sari ke behate stito di kun chinanish not igi de ahodim na di Leonard Peltier William nke nke nine nke non le walia hotsa sita e kompet ba nashtaho which yes do the touche that even showed in donut osse the citizen nail in aro sabin journey the yes do but set the center out in anleda the assessing of cottage con for jishiki the yat eho sadige be hates the arbel kanje hates to here and kidini do I want to give my appreciation, love, and solidarity to the Jericho organization for this invitation, and also Jorge for facilitating this. And I introduced myself in my Dene language. I said I was a townhouse clan. That's my matrilineal, my mother's side, my grandmother, through the matrilineal. That's how we, the name, introduce ourselves so the spirits will understand us. So I said I was a townhouse clan born for Chakahne, Mountain Cove. That's my father on the patrilineal side of on my father's side. And then my Chays are my grandparents on my mother's side, Topbaha, and that's River Edge. And my Nollies, and that's my paternal grandfathers. And I said that I was Anagani, one who walks around. So I have 4 clans. And we as Dene people introduce ourselves in that manner. And it allows us to make the connection with the spirits who are listening. And also you have a maintain a clarity of thought. And that's how we are given these instructions. And it's, I have a responsibility to pass that on to my children and my grandchildren, and then down the line. And that's how we, as Dene people, and I believe all Indian people, all Native Americans, American Indians, and indigenous people identify with their clans. And that was my introduction, and I'm honored and pleased to join you this afternoon to speak on some of the issues that I have worked on, and also other people who are involved in this area of work, religious freedom, human rights, treaty rights for indigenous people, for Indian people, and just all other human beings that are concerned with human rights, civil rights. And I know Jericho is very involved with advocating and working with individuals who are locked up in these iron doors, the institution of incarceration in the United States prison system throughout this part of the world where this institution, which is, by the way, a foreign institution, it came from Europe. So I applaud all of those of you who are involved in working in this area. And I'd like to give a shout out to a brother who recently was released after 47 years of incarceration, Jalil Monticone, aka Anthony Bottoms. So if he's listening, my heart and my spirit, my prayers go out to you, brother. Enjoy your freedom, and it's good to have you out in the free world. And I know a lot of people worked on your case through the years. 47 years you've been locked up in these iron doors, and you're a political prisoner. So a lot of people came to bat for you. A lot of people worked for your freedom, and I'm sure you know who those people are, and some of them are listening right at this time. And Jeffrey and Ann Lamb, Jorge, people like that who have worked for your freedom. So yeah, just like to say that acknowledgement at this time. And also, I'm speaking to you from my home in St. Michael, Arizona, Navajo Nation, Dene country, here in the Southwest. And as it was brought up that I worked 37 years as a spiritual advisor, as a director of the Navajo Nation Corrections Project, which was a advocacy program for Dene Navajo people incarcerated in the state prisons and the federal penitentiaries. And some of my responsibilities were advocating for religious rights, cultural and spiritual practices in the prisons. And that's a very important responsibility, because it allows the humanity of our essence to be touch, and the ceremonial practices is very important to maintain the dignity and the humanity of the person who's locked up. So that we had to fight for that. My work in that arena started in 1981 at the Arizona State Prison in Florence, Arizona. But there were two times that I experienced going into the prisons to meet with Native Americans. One time was in 1972, Stillwater, Minnesota, the Minnesota State Prison. I went into the prison with Leonard Peltier, Dennis Banks, Clyde Balcourt, Wallace Blackhawk, Vernon Balcourt. So those are individuals that took me with them. And that was the first time I ever went into a prison. We took a pipe into Stillwater, Minnesota State Prison. And it was in May of 1972. And that experience really made a profound impact on me, because we made a circle and we brought the pipe. Clodagh was the spiritual leader who led the services. I observed him, how he was able to do that circle. We smoked the pipe with all mainly it was Ojibwe, some Lakotas, Ho-Chunk. This was at the Minnesota State Prison, and it was so ironic. That was where the American Indian movement was born. It was formed there in 1968. So we went in there and took a pipe, and we had a pipe ceremony. So that was the first time I ever went inside the facilities with the American Indian movement. The second time that made an impression on me, that when I visited with the American Indian movement in Denver, Englewood, Colorado, the Federal Correctional Institution, Englewood, Colorado. And that was in, I believe that was in 1972. That was at the Englewood facility there. And we took a drum in there. And it was maybe 20, 30 Native Americans, big population. We took a drum in there, we had a talking circle, we talked. And that was Vernon Balcourt, Rod Skinnendorf, Wallace Blackhawk, individuals like that, Robbie Burnett, myself. And we talked to the young Native inmates. We sang. And most of them at that time didn't know how to sing. So that was a starting point for many of us, and myself included. So there were two times I went inside the prisons. In as I mentioned, 1972. One was in Stillwater, Minnesota. The other was in Englewood, Colorado. But the real work that I began as a volunteer was in 1981 in Arizona State Prison in Florence, Arizona. There were no sweat lodges in the system. So there was a young man and myself. His name was Wayne Wakazu, Wayne Charging Eagle from South Dakota. Him and I went into the facility there in Florence, met with the chaplain, the warden, and based on the request from the inmates, we volunteered to build a sweat lodge and do the ceremonies and teach and instruct. And it was approved. So that was my start as a volunteer. And when I got involved with Leonard Peltier, that was when I first met him in the streets in the free world, was 1970 in Denver, Colorado, where that was we were both free. I was a college student at Colorado State, and Leonard was traveling through Denver. I met him on the streets, and he was asking about the American Indian movement. And I told him that they had an office there. And Vernon Balcourt was the leader at that time for the Denver AIM chapter. So that was the first time we ever met on the streets. And I ran into him a few times after that. And I sundanced with him in 1975 after Oglala shootout there in Oglala, South Dakota. We got together that summer in August 1975 in Crodog's Paradise. And Leonard Crodog was the spiritual leader who ran the Sundance. So we sundanced. So I had that privilege, that honor to Sundance with Leonard Peltier, and the only one that he's done. Maybe he did some others, but because he was arrested about a year, 2 years later, they were looking for him. That was the summer of 1975. So I sundanced with him, and I remember that real well. So when I learned that he was arrested, he went to prison, he went to Marion, United States Penitentiary, Marion, Illinois, and we went to Springfield, Illinois. And we ended up in USP Leavenworth, Kansas. That was 1985. So I found out that he was there in Leavenworth. So I called a chaplain and requested that I be approved and allowed to come in to do sweat lodge ceremonies for the Indian boys there in USP Leavenworth. So that was my starting working with Leonard, 1985. See, he was arrested almost 10 years before that. So he was in other places like Longtime, Marion, I think he was, I'm not sure if he was at Allen, but I know he was in Marion. And, he was also in Springfield. And he ended up in Leavenworth. And he was in Leavenworth for a long time, about 20 years, from 1985 to maybe 2000, 2003, 2004, somewhere around there. And I was visiting him in Leavenworth for that period of time. And allies are very important. Friends, Jericho and other organizations, they're very important. Because the way I started going to Leavenworth was I had assistance from St. Mark's Church in Kansas City, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. That organization, they helped with my finances to fly from Albuquerque, New Mexico to Kansas City and then visit Leonard there in Leavenworth, USP Leavenworth. So I did that for that whole time. So I was able to make that 3-4 times a year. I would see him in the spring, summer, fall, and sometimes in January for Dr. Martin Luther King holiday. I make a special trip out there because I also spoke at that church, St. Mark's Church, which is an African-American church. And that was a very good experience for me because they allow me to speak, give a sermon. I would talk about Leonard Peltier and what I'm sharing right now about Native American experience, Native American thoughts, feelings, perspective, philosophy. And so that was a good experience. And so I became very close with Leonard. We're not related. He's an Ojibwe from Turtle Mountain, North Dakota. He's an Ojibwe in Dakota, where I'm Navajo, the So, but we're brothers in the struggle. And we both are sun dancers. And for those of you who don't know what the Sundance is, it's a vow that an individual, Native American individual, makes to sacrifice with no consumption of food or water for 4 days. And you dance to the sun. And, you're stripped down. You have a medallion. You have an eagle bone whistle. And then you wear a skirt and moccasins, and that's it. And you don't drink any water, you don't eat food for 4 days. It's very difficult. That's probably one of the most difficult ceremony that we have, and that came from the Lakotas. The Lakotas are the ones that kept that alive through the years, and it was illegal, it was outlawed. And it was outlawed to practice Indian religion or Indian spiritual beliefs or Indian culture. And basically, it was against the law to be Indian. So we were captured, put on reservations, and then sent to Indian boarding school. One that's very prominent is Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania, Haskell Institute in Lawrence, Kansas. Those are big schools or boarding schools where we went, where young Indian kids were sent to be educated. Hair was cut, names were changed, given English names. Colonization, brainwashing. They stripped all humanity, all dignity. It was very shaming. Your dignity was wiped. You went to school for 12 years. A lot of people lost their way of life, their language. You were forbidden to speak your Indian language. You had to become a Christian. So this colonization resulted in very heavy genocidal practices. It was very, very intense. And, really assimilation policies really wiped out many of our people. And they turned to alcohol, turned to suicides, shaming. Shaming is a very deep, bad feeling that we carry, the trauma, the intergenerational trauma that resulted. As it went from our great grandfathers through the line, through our grandfathers, to our parents. My parents went to boarding schools. They went to Fort Defiance boarding school. They went to Fort Wingate boarding school, St. Michael boarding school. They were taught to speak only English. And what's so ironic about that was for Navajos, many other tribes, was when World War II began, the United States government wanted to use the language as a way of messages, radio operators, and that's very important in a setting where war is enemies are listening in on your messages. And if they can decipher what you're saying, they can interfere and disrupt and ambush. But it was a gentleman who was raised among the Navajos, who later became a preacher. He convinced the United States government, and I think his name was Johnson. He was raised among the Navajos, so he knew how to speak English or speak Navajo. So he met with the government officials and told the military that they could use the Navajo language, because that's not a written language. And that was right around 1941, 1942. They started recruiting the government. The military was convinced that this language can be used, because it's not a written language, and only certain people and missionaries, Catholic priests, missionaries, white people, trading post operators, they knew how to speak Navajo because they were around that language. Navajo language is one of the most difficult language to learn. So that was a new innovative approach to sending messages. So the young Dene, my father was And these two brothers were recruited right out of high school, Fort Wingate, in New Mexico, boarding school there, because they were bilingual. They spoke Navajo, they spoke English. They were in high school, so they were recruited with many other. There was total of 400 young Navajo Dene young men were recruited, and they developed a code using the Navajo language. And then even an ordinary Navajo citizen wouldn't be able to decipher or understand the code. It was in the Navajo language, but they didn't know what was being said. Only a certain, it was an elite group. Basically, that's what that was. And, there's individuals who passed a course when they were sent to, after they finished their basic training. This is just the Marine Corps. It wasn't the sailors or Navy or the Air Force or the Army. It was the Marines, USMC. So they were sent to South Pacific for 3 years. 3 years. Ordinarily, if, individuals do a tour of duty, and they go home after 1 year. Not these individuals. They were in a combat setting for 3 years, from 1942 to 1945, after the atomic bombs were dropped. Then they were discharged. And my father, he never talked about it. They never talked about it. They were sworn to secrecy. They never talked about that, only until 1978, 1980, right around that. It's recent. They declassified that information. It was top secret. And he shared some of it with us. I have three brothers and a sister. And only then we found out that my dad was his brother, my uncle, and his other brother. It was Daniel, Donald, and my dad was Harold White Foster. So the three brothers, they went into the Marine Corps, and code talkers. And all three of them are gone now. And, if he lived, he would be 96 years old today. My dad and his brothers would be 98, 99 years old today if they lived. If they're gone, they passed away. My dad passed away 15 years ago. And his brothers passed away before them. So there's not very many. I think there's only two or three Navajo code talkers still living. So it's a memory now, but they're revered. They're revered elders, and they have August the 14th every year is a national holiday. It's a Navajo code talker day. And just recently, they had a big celebration, a lot of places. My daughter, my oldest daughter, Red Dawn Foster, who's a state senator from South Dakota, her mother is Lakota. So she's half Lakota, Oglala, and half Dene. She's a Kianani. But she's a South Dakota state senator because she grew up in Pine Ridge. And, so she called me and told me that she had a resolution, a proclamation in the South Dakota State Legislature this past year, August the 14th. They had a session and she told the governor that her grandfather was a Navajo code talker.
Mhm.
They asked her to talk about that, so she did a little introduction. And my daughter is 45 years old. She's my oldest one. Her mother's from Pine Ridge. I met her at Wounded Knee, South Dakota. And so we got married after that summer of 1973. We had three kids. It was Red Dawn, Warlance, Black Horse. They're all, she's the oldest, 45, 46 years old, and Warlance and Black Horse. He passed away. And I have a number of the grandkids, but they're 3/4 Navajo and 1/4 Lakota. But my kids are half. So the governor asked, how can you be a Navajo and Lakota? And she said, my mother is Lakota, and my father on that side of the family is the Navajo, and my grandfather, Lenny Foster, was a Navajo code talker. So they find, oh, okay, we understand now. So that's something I just want to share with you. But the point I'm making is that it's very important to maintain your language, your culture. And it's been hard. Generations made it very hard for a lot of our people. Became very traumatized. They lost their language because of the schools. The churches had a big influence in that. And we had to work on this renaissance, a revision, reviving our spirituality, our cultural, spiritual beliefs and values, and the American Indian movement, the Indian rights movement, the American Indian movement, which I was a part of, had a big role in reviving that movement, the dignity. And then the International Indian Treaty Council, which is the political arm of AIM, had a big role in taking these issues into the international arena. United Nations, the elders, Lakota headsmen, Wounded Knee, South Dakota, when it was all over and done, they advised that we take the pipe, the drum, take the issues, the treaties into the international arena in Geneva, Switzerland, the United Nations. Initially, it was difficult because even the world has been colonized. The world, nation states have been colonized. So we had to educate the different countries. The red nation, the red people. You really study the colors. The color yellow is on the east side. It's from the east direction. Then white is the south side, south boundary. Black is the west side, and then the red is in the north. So these are the basic colors of mankind: yellow, white, black, and red. In the international arena, only the red was missing. So that was very ironic that in 1977, the American Indian movement took the drum and the pipe, formed the International Indian Treaty Council, went to the United Nations. Those are individuals like Vernon Balcourt, Bill Means, Russell Means, Ted Means, Ron Lehman, Oren Lyons, David Munyongi, Ed Bernstick, Thomas Binyaka, people like that. Even Juan Aguilar. Juan Aguilar is from Peru, and he went with the group because he was working in the Treaty Council office in New York City. So there are many people, though. I can't recall all of them. I myself did not make that trip. Back then, you had to raise your own funds to travel, to buy a ticket. So it was a real effort to do fundraising. The Treaty Council office was in New York City, right across from the United Nations. So they had an office there, and they organized all of that. And they took a group to the United Nations. So we've been going every year since then, since 1977. And about a couple of years, after 1977, 1981, the Treaty Council demanded, requested in resolution, proclamation that there be a working group on indigenous people's issues. So now you have the working group on indigenous peoples in New York City, the Permanent Forum for Indigenous people is a direct result of that demand that the Treaty Council made. A lot of people don't know that. I think we should be reminded American Indian men was very adamant in having the issues heard in the United Nations arena, because there's other indigenous people also. Western Hemisphere is indigenous people's homeland. It's Alaska, Canada, United States, Mexico, Central America, South America, the native Hawaiians, Hawaii, Maoris in New Zealand, the Aborigines in Australia, Samoans in the South Pacific, all these different Tainos in Puerto Rico. Yeah, many indigenous people in the Western Hemisphere, this part of the world. There's even some in Europe, the Samis. Samis are indigenous people. They call them reindeer people. They don't like to be called that. They'd rather be called by their traditional name, Samis. So there you get people like that. So we became allies and friends and brothers, comrades in the struggle. And it's good to see Aborigines and the Maoris and the Native Hawaiians, and Mapuches and the Quechuas, and the Mayans and Kunas. These are different indigenous people from different parts of the world. And so I've made friends and allies with these people. So that's what the work that took us into the United Nations. And I've taken Leonard Peltier, the issue of Leonard Peltier, him being a political prisoner and incarceration for 44 years, and taken it into the international arena, educate the world. But it's a very slow process. It's a very slow process. It's taken 47 years for Jalil Monticon to be free. 47 years he's spent.
Yeah.
Former Black Panther, Black Liberation. And, so Leonard Peltier is the next one that's going to be released. We pray that he'll be released in our lifetime.
That's right.
I mentioned that at one point that many of our people, when they're arrested, the family is doing time with the individual. So I feel like I spent that time with Leonard Peltier, 44 years incarcerated, because I never forget him. And I go in and we do a sweat lodge ceremony, whether it was at Leavenworth, Lewisburg, Coleman, and I visit, they all get excited, they hear I'm coming, and I make sure I have my pipe clean, got mountain tobacco, picnic, sweetgrass, cedar, sage, my towel and trunks, and I visit, I fly to, well, like I said, I visited him in Leavenworth for 20 years, and I did about 8 years. Lewisburg when he was there. And then when he shipped to Coleman, the chaplain, the warden, says, well, they called me. First, it was approved for my sweat lodge ceremony with Leonard, with all the Indian boys that were there. The warden called me and said, it's come to my attention that you and Leonard Peltier are friends. And, the prison regulation, rules and regulations states that friends or relatives can't do any type of ceremonies. It has to be separate. You can visit in the visiting room, but not at the sweat lodge area. So my time, 35 years that I visited him, doing sweats with him, praying with him. Because I ran the sweat lodge ceremonies. And, based on my experience from the Sundance, Leonard's a Sundancer, so he knew the sweat lodge ceremony, the process, using the hot stones, the water, sage, the cedar, singing the songs, 4 rounds, I would arrive at the facility 8:30 in the morning. Then I would go in, meet the chaplain in the lobby. He would escort me out to the sweat lodge area. And I'd be out there until 2:30, 2:30 in the afternoon. So I was out there 6 hours. We'd sit around and talk, but we'd have our ceremony. That usually was a two-hour process. And about 11:30, 12 o'clock, right up to 2 o'clock, 2:15, and we'd finish up 4 rounds. We'd have a meal, and we put everything away, the blankets, the tarps. We'd finish up, and then they'd the chaplain will come out to the sweat lodge area and escort all of us back inside the cell block. And they would escort me out to the lobby. So I was in that facility for 6 hours. And it was quite an experience. I did that for 37 years. Did that for 37 years. I visited Leonard for 35 of those years. So that's my experience with him in a very intimate way through the sweat lodge ceremony. And so I appreciate the invitation to share some of that. Jericho has been the leading force to work on these issues. I'd like to share the status of Leonard Peltier at this time. You know, it's always been our work to get him free because he was railroaded into prison on false affidavits, witnesses that lied, they were coerced, very severe, extreme violation of the Constitution. The FBI lied, they fabricated the evidence, and so that's how that worked. And right now we have a gentleman who's a former United States District Court judge, an attorney, who's volunteering his time. And his name is Mr. Kevin Sharp. He's working very hard to set up a meeting with the Justice Department, with the Federal Bureau of Prison, and the Trump administration to discuss possible release and clemency. It looks good. It's been one of the most toughest cases that we encountered. And, you know, these issues, lies and coercion, witnesses were threatened. So there was many violations through that whole process. It's only coming to light what they did. And hopefully Leonard will be released based on that information, that evidence. Like I said, it's hard. So we continue to pray and hope. And one of the ways that we're doing, we've taken on that, is to approach NCAI, National Congress of American Indians. They represent 365 American Indian tribal nations, Indian nations in North America. And that's Lakota Sioux Tribe, Rosebud, Cheyenne, Crow, Navajo, Pueblos, Apaches, Cheyenne, Arapaho, Shoshones, Arapahoes, just different Indian nations throughout the United States. They all belong to NCAI. I approached them last October in Albuquerque, New Mexico at their annual conference and presented a resolution asking their help to set up a meeting with the Trump administration to discuss Leonard Peltier's case, and also set up a meeting with the Justice Department. And so those are being worked on at this time using the documents that I mentioned, the resolution of support that was approved by NCAI, and just documentation that's been submitted in Geneva, Switzerland, on behalf of Leonard Peltier, different expert mechanism. Those are different committees, the Human Rights Council, Commission on Human Rights, Committee for the Elimination of Racism and Discrimination, the Permanent Forum for Indigenous Peoples Issues. These are working groups, expert mechanisms. So it's a very tedious, slow process. You have to actually make the trip to Geneva, Switzerland. You got to have your passport in order. Got to have enough money. It's expensive. I fly out from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I drive down there, and you got to be there 2 hours early. And then you fly out from Albuquerque. I usually fly to either to Houston or Dallas, and from Dallas, Fort Worth to Newark, New Jersey. And from there, I fly to Geneva, Switzerland. It's an overnight flight, but it's a long flight. I would leave Albuquerque Saturday morning. Got to be there 2 hours early. They're strict about it. You show up. It's an international flight. You show up. But one time I was 1 hour. I was early. I was there 2 hours, but because the lines were so long, by the time I got to the ticket counter, they said, "Well, you're going to Geneva, Switzerland. That's an international flight. You should have been here 2 hours ago." I said, I was in the back of the line back there. I'm sorry, but we can't get on this next flight. And they rescheduled it where I had to fly from Albuquerque to Minneapolis. Then I had to fly out from Minneapolis. But that's just an example. Usually, after that, I learned to go down to Albuquerque the day before, and stay at the airport, or stay at a hotel near the airport. So I'd be at the airport at 5:30 in the morning for a 10 o'clock departure, 11 o'clock departure. Then I would fly to Newark, New Jersey, and fly out of Newark, New Jersey like around 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, fly all night, get to Geneva, Switzerland the next morning, Sunday morning at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. And you have to go through customs, get your bag, take a taxi to the hotel. And the meetings begin Monday. So you have to be ready. Jet lag is the problem, but I've learned to deal with that. And Monday morning at the United Nations, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, early, but they operate on a different time. Their time is everything starts at 10, 11 o'clock. They run till 1 o'clock, and from 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock. It's not like 8 to 5 here in the United States. So I learned about that. And jet lag, I learned how to deal with that by going to sleep as soon as I get to the airport or to the hotel at my arrival, and sleep all afternoon and the evening. So the next day I'm okay. Whereas if you try to stay up and then try to operate on the time that you do here in the United States, Monday morning you're jet lagged, or you're just groggy, and because you do need that sleep, you need that time, your body to rejuvenate itself. So these are some of the things you have to deal with, and it helps. You learn Spanish. Spanish is a language that's used in the international arena. You don't know how to speak German, French, Swiss, so it's best to learn to speak Spanish. The Spanish, everyone speaks Spanish. You don't speak English. But you know what's so amazing to me is English is a language that's spoken all over the world. And, English is spoken at the United Nations. But sometimes some people like from South America, they speak Spanish. We're indigenous, but they speak Spanish. So in order to communicate with them, you got to speak Spanish. Because they have this thing about they don't speak the oppressor's language. That was something I learned. The oppressor's language is English. And who's their oppressor? It's the English, Caucasian. So they made a remark to me one time. We don't speak the oppressor's language. Oh, okay, but they only speak English. I remember I met with Fidel Castro in Havana, Cuba. He speaks English, but he doesn't want to speak English. You have to go through an interpreter. That was something that I said, oh, I better learn how to speak Spanish. This is a Fidel Castro. And then I went to Bolivia, met with Evo Morales a couple of years ago. He understands little English, but he prefers to speak Spanish. So I had to go through an interpreter. So I said, I better learn how to speak Spanish. So there's something I just wanted to share with the audience. I advise you to learn another language besides English. You're going to do this kind of work. Learn your songs and learn your prayers. Learn your native language. Because there are people that travel out there. They're amazed that we still have our language, sing our songs, culture. So that's very advisable to relearn your language, your prayers, your songs, so you can represent yourself well. That's what I've learned in the work that I'm doing, that I've done with not only religious freedom for Native prisoners, but working with Leonard Peltier. And I mentioned Leonard Peltier is one of the toughest cases I worked in. I've worked with 4 death row inmates. I just had a client that was executed here a couple months ago in the United States Penitentiary, Terre Haute. His name is Lesmont Mitchell, a young Navajo man. He spent 19 years on death row and he was executed in the federal prisons. They resumed their execution. And I've done one in Florence, Arizona in 1999. I did one in 2000 in San Quentin, California. I did one in Potosi, Missouri in 1988. So I've done now that three others that are pending. One in Utah State Prison, Draper, Utah. Young Hopi man from Palaka, Arizona. He's waiting for his execution. A warrant of execution. He asked me, because I'm his spiritual advisor, he asked me who he wants to do, because they can choose their method. Of course, he wants to be released. He's appealing down. He chose time and use of fire. And then in Arizona, there are 2 claims, so that's a lethal injection. So those are work that my work with the corrections part is taking me into that world, execution of the Native Americans in the prisons. I wrote, and that was to conduct a last rites ceremony using a sweat lodge, pray with a pipe, and pray with the client, the individual. So that's something that's very tough, very difficult. Works on your mind. I have ceremonies to help me work through all that. Otherwise, I have bad dreams or bad, it affect me. But I have ceremonies done to protect me. And blessing that's the same for those individuals who go into combat. And then my dad told me about when he came back from the Marines after World War II. They had a dressing day ceremony. His brothers, Donald Foster, Daniel, and Harold Y. Foster, they had blessing day ceremonies. And the enemy were rid of bad thoughts, bad spirits. So that similar ceremony that I go through to deal with death row, so you don't have bad dreams, bad thoughts. So those are some ways to deal with that. And of course, the sun dance, the pipe ceremonies, prayers. Prayer is very important in our work. And, so that's some of the ways. The other is, aside from litigation, courts, taking all these cases in the courts, testifying. I've testified many times in federal court, state courts, on religious rights, the sweat lodge, long hair, sage, cedar, items, even the drum. These are all challenges by the white man, by the prison officials. They don't want us singing. They don't want us using the pipe. They don't want us to have long hair. They don't want us having excess to sweat lodge for cleansing and purification. They don't want us to, they don't want the inmates to have access to spiritual leaders. So all these cases have been tested. And I myself got involved in some of that through my clients. And I consulted with Walter Eckelhoff, Kurt Blue Dog, way back, 1981. Walter Eckelhoff was a Pawnee. He's retired now, but he must have spent 40, 50 years as an attorney. He became a premier Indian rights attorney. And there's many very outstanding young Native attorneys that are working with the Native American Rights Fund, with the Navajo Nation, with the Oglala Sioux tribe that work on these issues. Some of the most impressive issues today is a fight for water rights, human rights, treaty rights. So these are some of the cases. The work that I got familiar with is religious freedom, human rights, civil rights, religious rights. I learned. Jailhouse lawyer. I've learned it myself by reading, research. Then like I said, I was honored to work with Walter Eckelhoff and Danny Quintana in Colorado. You'll see some of the other attorneys I not able to think of them right now. But I learned the Native American rights from they were very instrumental in fighting for this American Indian religious freedom throughout the United States and the American Indian Movement, the International Indian Treaty Council. Those are two organizations also that are very active in the struggle, very prominent advocates for Indian rights, human rights. You know, we started out with civil rights. 1968 was the American Indian Civil Rights Act. And we started out using that law. And then it kept progressing. And we went into the, like I said, into Wounded Knee treaty rights. 1868 treaties were brought into court. The government didn't want to deal with it because they had to deal with treaties. They're not comfortable with that because they want to deny, because every one of the treaties have been broken. So they don't want to bring that up in the court, but they're not honorable. They break these treaties. The treaties is the law of the land. You know, the elder, the headsman, the Lakota headsman, they had the vision. They saw that take these treaties into the international arena, put it there on the table, sit at the table with the different nation states throughout the world, represent the color red on the table, and use the 1868 treaty. The Navajo Nation, we have the 1868 treaty. So many tribes do have treaties with the United States government. So that is being tested. Like I said, it started out with civil rights and treaty rights. Now we're in the arena of human rights. Human rights. That's untested. the Declaration of Human Rights for Indigenous People. It's not a law, but it's a policy that can be used in the courts. And, took the United States a long time. They were one nation state. Canada, Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand. These are all colonizers. When you look at them, these are all colonizers. They don't want indigenous people that have human rights, civil rights, treaty rights. But Canada, United States, Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand. Look at them. One by one, they fell. They finally realized. I think it was the British. The British, they realized that they were wrong. So they let the Maoris have their rights that were guaranteed in New Zealand. And finally, United States, Canada, colonizers. Those are British, English, Dutch, Spanish. It's ironic when we see them in the United Nations, sometimes they're humbled by our presence, but we're still here. We survived.
That's right.
Through 400 years. They tried to exterminate us. They committed genocide. They brainwash us, colonize us. We have to be responsible to decolonize, to overcome that shame, and that's why you see the revival, resurgence, renaissance in the Indian community, indigenous communities. They wear their traditional dress, their traditional way of dress. They relearn their languages, their culture, their spirituality. So it's a renaissance, transformation. A lot of that resulted when you study history. The stand the American Indian movement did at Wounded Knee, and then the formation of the International Indian Treaty Council. And when we share and tell these stories to the Samis and the Kunas and the Mayans, the Mapuches and the Quechuas, they're fascinated by it. They call us the Red Indians, the Red Indians. They believe in that. They say when they were growing up, they always sided with the Indians when they seen Cowboy and Indian show, John Wayne. And they say, you watch that stuff? I said, oh yeah, I always wanted to meet the Indian. I remember I met some young Kunas from Panama, Mayans from Guatemala, Mapuches. And I told this one leader, I can't remember his name, but he was the Russell Means of the Mapuches, the Quechuas. They're like 20 million strong, 20 million, and we're still living there in Peru and Chile. And here, the largest tribe in the United States or North America is Navajo, 360,000. Then the Cherokees, read about that too, 360,000. That's not much. It's 300,000, 360. And then I think now was at 364. That's not even a million. It's not even a million. So that's something that I just want the audience to know firsthand. So the legislation, the state, federal, to establish the strategy behind that is to establish the laws and the state statutes or the federal. I testified, and like I said, like we said, the bio, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. That was legislation that I worked on with the Indian legislatures. We had Navajo legislatures. See, that was a move too. Voting is very important for Indian indigenous people to get our own people in as representatives for House of Representatives or senators at the state level and the federal level. So one of the strategy that I used was to introduce the religious freedom bills at the state level. So I got in contact with the Indian legislatures and explained we introduced a piece of legislation that would allow our Indian boys and men and women that are incarcerated to be allowed to have sweat lodges, to have pipe ceremonies, to have talking circle, to have access to spiritual leaders, to do counseling, to meet with death row inmates. So it was introduced. And it was difficult. The state legislatures, they don't like that. They don't like that. Racism is intense in Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. They don't want Indian boys or Indian people that have access to the sweat lodge, long hair, to sing, use their drum, they have the pipe ceremonies. So we had to fight for that, testify in the committees. I even had a state senator from Las Cruces, New Mexico, in the New Mexico State Legislature asked me one time, he had a question in the committee. He said, what makes you guys, why you talk about all this? What makes you so special? I said, oh, remind you, sir, there are Indian nations. We think of ourselves as sovereign nations. You call them tribal governments, but we are sovereign nations. Our ancestors signed treaties with the United States government. The state, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, those are states, but you're subordinate to the United States government. So the United States government signed a treaty with our ancestors. That treaty still is binding. So when we introduce these legislation, we want to pass so it can become part of the state statutes, whether it's federal law or state law, that we're allowed to have access to use of the sweat lodge, pipe ceremonies, long hair, herbs, the drum, to have our ceremonial practices, ways respected and honored. So that was the strategy behind the state legislature. So hopefully that answers the question why we pursued them. And I had the blessing of the Navajo Nation, and then also amicus curiae briefs that we submitted with some of these lawsuits through the Navajo Nation Justice Department or the American Native American Rights Fund. And there's lawyers, like I said, Walter Echo, who's a very he's a premier Indian rights attorney. There are others. So we utilize the services, the mind of these people to take these issues into that arena. So I've been blessed to be part of all of that transformation, that renaissance, and I guess I was at the right place at the right time. And I want to see Leonard Peltier released from prison. Jalil was recently released. Makes my heart feel good that because I went to see him twice up in the Sullivan Correctional Facility. Ann Lamb and Jeffrey took me up there. They arranged it so I could spend that time and made a prayer with him in my Dene language with him. The prayer was to ask the spirits to open the iron doors so he can go home. And I pray the same way for Leonard Peltier. That will happen. You just have to maintain our faith and our belief. So that's part of the prayer that I made. So I'd like to do a closing prayer once the session here is ended, or I don't know what's your time limit.
Well, I mean, Lenny, I think what you've shared so far is really just a wealth of knowledge and experience. And
I know some other questions.
well, I got a quick question for you. I mean, obviously, we see that that recently within last couple of months, there's a great sort of uh, kind of resurgence of you know people of color really stepping up against police brutality, particularly with the Black Lives Matters movement. I'm curious, is does that resonate in the reservations? Does it resonate with the Navajo community? Is there are there any kind of connections with these other struggles that are currently going on?
Yes, I think so. You know, the Black Lives Matter movement is very important. We need to respect it. We need to honor it. We need to pray for it as we seek allies. Allies are important. And we have in-laws that are African American. Uh, my family is my father, he was like I said, he was a code talker. So he went out into the outside world as a young man. His brothers, they were in San Diego, Los Angeles, Honolulu. Then they went into battle and combat. So that experience, being out there in the outside world, uh, they saw things, they felt things, and they came home. They went, they finished, they got jobs, and some they continued their education. My father, he wanted us to go to school to be educated, so we went. The three brothers and the sister, we all have advanced degrees. And along that road, along that process, we were athletes from high school into college. So along that road, the experiences of being in contact with the African Americans, uh, Chicanos, and some of my teammates were African Americans. And some of my teammates were Chicanos from Tucson. And, so that was a good experience for me to talk to some of these different nationalities. And then I played semi-pro baseball. I played college baseball. I played semi-pro baseball. My dad was a coach. And some workers for the Bureau of Indian Affairs were African Americans. They wanted to play baseball with the all-Indian team. My dad would say, sure, come on, bring out your shoes and your glove. Come to practice. And we have our games on Sunday. Town teams, semi-pro. That's equivalent of a double A. So I got to acquainted with some of these, and this was in high school. Summer baseball. I got acquainted with some of the African Americans. And then in college, so that broadened our perspective. When I enjoy reading, research, so I feel like I'm well read. So I read about the struggle, the slavery, which was wrong. But so when what they're doing in this today, since the slavery ended, they still have the Jim Crow practices. I saw that, and what they're doing today, the police are indiscriminately assassinating, shooting, killing African Americans for no reason at all other than their skin is black. And I don't like that. I don't appreciate that. So I know that that's wrong. But the courts, the justice, the criminal justice system is It's very slanted. And we have to continue to support one another, to respect one another, seek those allies. And I think Navajo people, Indian people, realize that because of what we went through, the genocide that has been committed against our people. And, we share that feeling, that experience of what the white man has done. We see that they're doing that to the African Americans, shooting them. And, we don't like it. So it's reached generations. And, we don't turn a blind eye or feeling towards that. It's wrong. And we need to support the brothers and sisters who have struggled. The first time that I ever met Black Panthers was 1969 out in Oakland, California. I read about them because I graduated in 1967. And I remember reading about the Black Panthers out in California, Oakland, California. And I finally met some of them in Oakland, California at a conference, 1969. And I was telling Jalil that, he was fascinated by that. He said, tell me about it. I said, yeah, I went to Oakland, California. I met some Black Panthers. And just recently, here about 2 years ago, I went to the 50th anniversary. I was invited to the 50th anniversary of the Black Panther 50th anniversary in Oakland, California. I was one of the guest speakers representing the American Indian International Treaty Council. And I got to meet some of the former Black Panthers. And I told them that story, that I went to Oakland, California, the United Front Against Fascism. It was a big conference that everybody knew about. You were there? They said, yeah, I was there. I went. I didn't see any Indians at that time, but I was working for the Colorado Migrant Council that summer. Colorado Migrant Council was working with the United Farm Workers. I worked in Colorado under Lalo Delgado, Tomas Atencio, Len Olivella, people like that, who were organizers with Chicano, but they invited Indians to work in their organization. And so there were some Native Americans, Navajos and Makotas that were migrant workers, hoeing sugar beets, picking potatoes, and picking melons, apples, cherries. That's the work that they did. Hoeing sugar beet, that was a big one. Potatoes, the summer of 1968, summer of 1969. I put baseball aside and did that work as an organizer. It was hard work, organizing. You had to be motivated to help organize and advocate for migrant workers. You see the conditions and the treatment of these people who work 10, 12 hours a day out in the field, hot. They have their kids with them. That moved me. I did that 2 summers working for the Colorado Migrant Council. And that was Chicanos. They were the organizers. They invited some Indian students, to college students, to do that. I was one of them. I chose to do that and give up my summer. 2 summers of playing baseball. And Saul Alinsky, he came to Denver, Colorado, 1968, to teach organizing. He's an old man by then. I'm sure you've heard of Saul Alinsky, who's a famous organizer, socialist organizer from Chicago. He taught Lalo Delgado, Tomas Atencio, Len Alvia. They were all young. We were all young. I was 21 years old. I was way over my head in that. But I listened, I learned, and it all became clear to me years later when I started thinking, reading about it more. Oh, man, he was a Jewish He came to Denver, Colorado, to the Albany Hotel right there, Denver, Colorado, and did a session with the group. We were there listening to him talking about organizing. Then he passed away. But I always remember that. And I bought a book years later that he had written about organizing. And I tell some people that Saul Alinsky, he was a Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama's mentor, because he's from Chicago. And, they learn the training and the techniques, but with us, or for me, I learned it from Lalo Delgado, Tomas Atencio, George Mata, Tom Jones, Leonardo, because they were the people who trained under Saul Alinsky, the Colorado Mining Council. I remember telling Vernon Dalcourt, Clyde Dalcourt about that. They just looked at me and, well, I'm sure they understood what I was talking about, but it was something that they didn't really connect at the time. Because Vernon was very intelligent. Our AIM leaders are all gifted. They were very talented, very intelligent orators. Clyde Dalcourt, Dennis Banks, Russell Means, like I said, Vernon Dalcourt, Bill Means, Ron Lehman. These are some. Pancho Collier, I talked to him about. He's the special rapporteur for Indigenous people today. And he's in that high position going all over the world. James Anaya was. It was hard to speak with James Anaya. I'm not even sure if he was listening to you. Talking to him. Sometimes they don't want to listen to. They call us militants, radicals, hostiles. That's what we are. Yes, hostiles. Our ancestors were hostiles. So sometimes I have a hard time comprehending that we have those experiences. I know Walter Eckelhart understood what I was talking about when he used to talk to me about this. And then I tell people that I rode with Dennis Banks and Russell Means and Dennis Banks in the Battle of Wounded Knee. My mentor was Vernon Dalcourt. I know Clyde Dalcourt, Leonard Peltier. But I also met Yasser Arafat, Fidel Castro, Evo Morales, Jesse Jackson, people like that. Those might be once in a lifetime. I know Jorge Chang, people like Ann Lam and Jeffy, Maggie, people like that. So it's there, the experience is there to happen for a reason. It's my responsibility to make something good out of that. And what I'm sharing with you is one time. If I was to ask to speak again, I probably wouldn't repeat what I'm saying now because it's not what I'm feeling at the moment. Right now, I'm feeling all this, what I'm sharing with you. It's coming to my mind like that. It's coming fast and quick. And,
Well, I know that you're gonna work on your memoir. So I'm sure we'll be able to. You'll be sharing all all the stories that you have that you've accumulated over the years, with everyone, the larger community, who wants to know about it.
yes, I have plans to do that. That will be a more deliberate effort. Take time, a slow process. I have an outline. I need to, try to put everything down, then write it down. Then I gotta tape it. But then there's things I'll remember later. And, I said, oh, I need to put that in there too, because just I'd like to acknowledge right now my friends that were with me in the Little Bighorn bunker in the Wounded Knee. 71 days. We almost we didn't get shot. None of us got shot, but we survived 11 firefights. Percy Casper, Shuswap Indian, John Carlson, Ojibwe from Minnesota, John Perot, Menominee, Fuzzy Miller, Menominee, from Neopet, Wisconsin. There's Dick Lagarde, George Rogers, uh, people like that I remember them. Some of them are gone. So I have a responsibility to remember and share, not to forget them. David Wilson, he's Ojibwe, some of the AIM Patrol. There's Dick Lagarde, George Rogers, David Wilson, Rick Powers, Chris Westerman, people like that. They need to be given that respect, the worthy of mentioning, because they were there. They were part of that struggle. Uh, Stephanie Autumn, she was there. Anne Begay, uh, and yeah, there's I'm trying to think of Cindy Largo, Robbie Burnett, Andrew Kelly, um, people like that were very much in the forefront of the early stages of the American Indian movement. Can't forget them. So this memoir that you're talking about, I intend to do that. I want to use a lot of pictures because I had a lot of pictures through the years. I was just talking to Tom Cook, Mohawk. I found a couple of pictures. He's in it, black and white. I called him up and I told him, hey, just hang in there. I got these pictures and we'll send them to you. Wavy Gravy, Woodstock fan. I found some pictures and I saw him at Buffy St. Marie's concert in Oakland, the 50th anniversary of the takeover occupation Alcatraz. I saw Wavy Gravy at the concert and I shook hands with him. I told him I have a picture of you. I need your address so I can send you a picture. And he said, who's in the picture? I said, well, there's you, there's me, Floyd Redco Westerman, Dennis Banks. Oh, I'd like to have it. I said, I'll send it to you. And then I told him, I said, you know, I didn't make it to Woodstock. I missed that one. I was at Alcatraz. I was at Wounded Knee. I was at the BIA takeover, but I missed Woodstock. Oh, you didn't miss nothing. It was more important to go to Alcatraz and Wounded Knee. Tells him, this is Wavy Gravy now, aka Hugh Romney. So people like that, you know. And then the one, I can't recall the name, but Ann Lamb was telling me about her encounter with the dictator of Nicaragua, I believe it was, and she was doing her time down there. I met him in Havana, Cuba. Yeah, I can't think of his name. My memory.
Lenny.
Somoza. They got rid of Somoza, but he was the leader of the Sandinistas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll go into the memoirs, pictures. I have a lot of pictures. Put them in there. So thank you for reminding me of that. And then I'm trying to think what else. There's something else, a question you had. You're going to have to tell me again so I can refresh my memory. Is there
Well,
any other questions?
I got another question for you. So, I mean, obviously, we know that the this year really has been, um, you know, the world has been hit by this pandemic, COVID-19, pretty hard. So, can you share with us what's going on in the Navajo community? What's going on? Is there things that the folks outside that community can do to help? Um, I've heard that you guys have been hit pretty hard.
It was probably the hardest thing that's that affected our people. We lost many, many lives in the thousands. It affected, I don't know the exact numbers right offhand, but it's in the thousands, hundreds of thousands that were infected. And, one of the main reasons was the community is very close knit. Of course, the information regarding living off the land, no water, no running water, no indoor running water, no electricity. That resulted in many of our people being infected. We catch it. It all started back in, I believe it was January or February. Well, in March, it really hit big time because it spread among the coronavirus really spread throughout the Indian community and over in the western part of the Navajo reservation near Tuba City and Kayenta. But it started with a revival at the Baptist church. A lot of our people belong to that faith. They believe in the revival Christianity. And they had these meetings. The pastor was a white man. He had coronavirus, so he caught either in Phoenix or Tucson, came up to Chinchilpito, and they had some services, and he spread it to everybody there at the service. They took it home and spread it to the families and the community, and it spread like wildfire. And pretty soon it was throughout the whole reservation, and it affected all our people because we didn't know what it was. And it was as a result of no running water where you could maintain your personal hygiene, washing hands, and also no electricity. So those kind of luxuries are not within the reservation. We're still in the 19th century. That's something that needs to be expounded on. So I think this money that was given by the government, CARES money, which was in the millions actually, maybe 400 or 500 million. One of the initiatives to use that money is not only to give money to the individual enrolled citizens of the Navajo Nation, but I said there's 364,000. So they're talking about giving 1,500 to each adult, and then 500 to each child that's enrolled that has census numbers. Then also another initiative to use that money is to build water lines, to get water into each home, Hogan, running water, electricity. I myself here, this place, I bought this house, so it has running water, electricity, heat. My family and grandchildren live here with me. But not everyone has a house like this. I worked with the Navajo Nation Corrections Party, the Department of Health for 37 years. So I worked up savings and also a retirement pension. So now I'm able to live off of that Social Security. So I took care of myself, my family that way. So we're not out on, because I grew up in the way that I was talking, Hogan, sheep camp. Me and my sister, we didn't have running water. We didn't have electricity. We had kerosene lantern. We had to haul water. We had to haul cut firewood. And I did that with my grandpa. My grandpa was Jim Black Oak Brigade. And my grandma was Ursula Black Oak Brigade. They're gone now, but they're the ones that raised me and my sister. So we grew up with a dirt floor with Hogan. We had to haul water. We used to take huge containers and put it in the back of the wagon, horse-drawn wagon, and go about 5, 6 miles to a water pump, fill up those containers in the back of the wagon, and we used to bring it back and just park it under a tree right near the hogan. And we had to go out and cut wood. And we had a wood stove. That's how my grandma cooked. And then we had a kerosene lantern for the light. So that's how I grew up. Probably up to sixth grade. And, then as I went to public school right there in Fort Defiance, where we moved because my father was a code talker. All the code talkers, they got jobs with either the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Indian House Service, the schools, and they all got jobs because of the service that they did with the code talkers. That was their reward for what they did. My dad, he worked for Indian House Service for over 30 years, maybe 40 years. He worked a long time. So he was able to buy a house. So we walked to school, high school right there in Fort Defiance. It was called Winter High School. And what my father really pushed us was education. He wanted us to go to school, graduate, go to college. He said, none of us, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, they're not educated. They don't speak the English language. They did because my mother and father, they went to a boarding school, Fort Wingate and St. Michael. So when the war came, they left. We went out to, well, my father and his brothers went into the service, but my mom, she went out and worked in California. So they saw that world. So when they came back, they made sure that the kids, their kids, got educated. So we were told that we had to go to school. We walked. We didn't have to take a bus. We didn't go to boarding schools. There was a public school right there in Fort Defiance. A lot of us, we went to school there. The Windrock School District. I went to Windrock High School because my dad wanted us to get educated. We all graduated and went on to college. And sports was a big thing too. That kept us out of trouble. So we became athletes. Football, basketball, baseball, track. My brother Chuck, he's a PhD doctor now. Works for Utah government in Indian education. He has a PhD and he's a 4-time All-American cross country. He was a state, all-state cross country, and then he went on to college. And he became a national champion. He had the fastest, it was two miles in the country at one time, 1972, I think it was. And he became All-American. He ran for KU and University of Arizona. And, Billy Mills recruited him to KU right out of junior college. He was a junior college All-American. Then my other brother, Jorge, he was a baseball player. He was a good baseball player. My other brother, Larry, he was a baseball player too. He was like me. I had a tryout with the Los Angeles Dodgers farm system, 1965. And Larry had a tryout with the Chicago Cubs farm system when it was 1969. He played for Back Home. They went to the Junior College World Series, Grand Junction, Colorado. So we have all these little stories of who we individually. Along the way, we stayed with college. But I joined the American Indian Movement in Denver, Colorado. But the point I'm making is education is emphasized. The education that was emphasized, we took advantage of it, and then, but also respected our upbringing, where we came from, and relearn the culture, the traditional beliefs, the values, the prayers, the songs. Native American church. It's a purity religion. We belong to that. Sitting in Sundance, we joined the Sundance through AIM. That wasn't a Navajo or Dene ceremony. That came from the Lakotas. But now we have Navajo Sundance. Sundance is down here in the Southwest. So that grew. So that grows, that movement. And so sports did a lot. Sports did a lot for us. And I always encourage my son. He played college basketball. He played professional basketball with the Denver Nuggets.
Oh, wow.
2002. He's in the record books. Even Lenny Foster.
Oh,
He just went out the door and my grandkids. He's like 6'4". He played for Western State College. He played for Central Arizona Junior College. And he played in the ABA. He had a trial with the Denver Nuggets. And, Native American.
okay.
His mother is Lakota. I'm the Dene, so he's half. So my grandkids are one-fourth Lakota and 3/4 Dene. So that experience combined with education and sports kept us out of trouble. And somebody always asked me, how come you didn't go to prison? Well, I never got caught, but then at the end too, I didn't do anything to warrant being locked up. And the guys used to ask me when I go to prison to do my swear ceremonies with them. They wanted to know if I did time. Was I in prison? No. And I said, how'd you get away from that? I said, well, I never got caught. I didn't do anything to warrant being locked up. I guess the closest I came was when I was a wounded knee, I fought the United States government, federal marshals, for 71 days. But the ones that were charged were the leaders. The leaders. It was Dennis Banks and Russell Means. They were charged. Leonard Peltier.
Mm-hmm.
They were able to base it on defending themselves, treaty rights. So we brought that into the white man doesn't like that. They don't like it when you bring treaty rights into the courts, because then they have to prove. We can prove it. Our ancestors signed it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like to defend them because they lie, they cheat, they steal, they broke every one of the treaties. So it gets complicated for them, but for us it's very simple.
Mm-hmm.
Just honor our ways, honor these treaties. So education is important. Education is voting is important. We need to vote. But this pandemic, it's been devastating for the Native people. I carry a lot of grief over that. And I lost a lot of friends. I lost about 4 or 5 friends, close friends. They caught it and because they were predisposed health condition. Diabetes is a very prominent affliction in the Navajo community. High blood pressure, alcoholism, poor diet. That's pre-existing conditions that takes affect obesity. Obesity and high blood pressure and diabetes. So I've lost some close friends, some co-workers, people I work with in the Department of Health. They lost it. And it didn't take long. It didn't take long. You hear about Trump bragging around and I call it. Yeah, he has the best health the world can offer because he's the president. But not all of the people, we don't have that access to health people to work with the community. So we have to be careful, wear a mask, practice our hygiene, stay away from crowds.
Mhm.
We've been sheltered here since March, and get stir crazy, but we got to do that. Don't want to go out there and Bahtsadu, the question would yay, Bahtsadu, the mega speda husband, you must send on to chair. You get on, no, you get the net, the Iran, Bahtsadu, and the Told they cut the Bahtsadu, the no, you got to. Christian should be that even so I'm just saying that this is what elders say, to be careful, that it's dangerous, and we need to recognize that. So it's still very prominent. It's right outside. It's right outside. We don't go in the backyard. It's okay, but I do that with
Mhm.
front door and out in the community. It's not safe. Got to wear your mask. So we practice that. So pandemic has hit our not only the Navajo but Indian nations, Indian people, real big time, real heavy. So we recognize that. And, so we're praying that things will change. We have to be patient. A lot of people don't believe in vaccine. And some of us, I just had my flu shot the other day. Some people, they don't want flu shots. They don't want vaccine shots. And that's your own wish. That's your own prerogative. I feel if we can get that protection, along with practicing and maintaining distance between, stay away from crowds,
Mhm.
wash your hands, and wear your mask. Got to do that. You can't just run out there and not do these things. You'll catch it. And that's it. That happens. So, but that's my personal feelings. Maybe some people don't want to hear that, or they don't believe in that. I respect you for what you believe. I run into people at the store right down the block here. They don't wear no mask. And I don't want them standing right in front of me talking to me
Mhm.
because
Well, we've got about 10 minutes.
yeah,
We do want to. I do want to say on behalf of the Jericho movement, both the national as well as the New York City chapter. We always a pleasure, always a treat, always an honor to have this to be able to be in your presence and have a conversation and just learn and hear about all the wealth of experience you've enjoyed and you've lived through. Um, that being said, we would really be again honored if you can share a closing prayer with us as we close out the this conversation. Of course, we hope to see you in person sooner than later. Um, and if not, then we can always set up another Zoom um, in the near future.
thank you. Well, I'll see you next summer.
I hope so. I hope
20,
so.
2021, I'll be in New York City. I'll be there. I'm being optimistic. I'm being hopeful. And it's important that we maintain our connection. It's important we respect the movements. It takes all kinds of people to be in a movement. It takes all kinds of background people to be part of this movement. It's important. Jericho is important. American Indian Movement is important. International Indian Treaty Council is important. Our political prisoners are important. We need to exercise our faith. We need to exercise our patience. We exercise our love and our solidarity with the movements, the struggles. So I honor the presence of people in my life the people I've met through Jericho and the Peltier Defense Committee, yourself, and Lamb, and Jeffy, Maggie, people like Peter Clark, and others there that I know, Treaty Council, Ron Lehman, uh, people that are part of that organization, Contra Collie, the Special Rapporteur for Indigenous People, Andrea Carmen and her husband, Angel, and others that have been part of this movement. We lost some people. So I'd like to honor the request that you made and say a prayer, closing prayer. بهجان دولت کدوم که ماستن چیز کابه بیکن چه بزنی بیانم ته بیکن جو بانسان بیکن شندن لا بهجان دولت ها شد نه مش بهجان دادن بهجان کیره بهجان یاره بهجان کار آسون که نه بیکن بیاد او بهجان مستن یاد خیلی ایت این تر دینه بنجان کنه چی هر بنجان سنانس کیس چیز بیان بیکن به هجان بیکن ben hinhatta yidikon inna sehatsen beyat behezon misklin harodikon serzenidikon hiken long dikon afto benashni dikon sewen long dikon benashni doles harodikon sehatsen harodikon senalke harodikon sekedan long Tratje without international International Treaty Council. We call Andrea Carmen, Ron Lynn, and Pancho. How do they call special repertoire? Don't eat the home by street or this. How do they call system? Don't. We call Bill Means, Tony Gonzalez about eight. We call the Hejond or this. How do they call Jericho? Don't. Jorge, and Lamb, and Jeffy, Auto Decon, Maggie, Auto Decon, Beyat El Decon, Jalil, Enatsa, Auto Decon, Indian, Jano, Bahin Laudi, Citizen, Benash, Milocondi, Leonard Peltier, Bahin Lada, Live Indian, Jano, Juana, Dafato, Buttons, and Edith Anja, Citizen. We conjure by Lanson, they conjure, and Addison. Yet if you John H. in Saratini, then John Shanati, Harodi Con, in this case, and he seek case, but yet he not yet and he nabiat and he sahats and yet a good auto buttons and we con Ashon the Chicago in long deed said is an either the kid now of stuff, the kid now stop it. They didn't shade it said this. So maybe that since 1934 course sleep events 80 concept in the machine tobacco patas long they control they can be at benefits they can Jericho organization New York City don't 80 could out while you hot saw this about nation 80 could out they yat that's what chucha the eat all this Bahas tree what's up is den shade de hastig also zabe hastig det så det är mest blindade eftersom det har en lång tid ett så på en zon afiyaro said afiyaro na afiyaro na kusbiyo the hezon screen the hezon screen the hezon screen the hezon screen the whole talk us Lenny Peltier, the house too, that's a good scene. They would have bought an income, which means La 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 Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. Hookah. 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 Yupo. Yupo. Which day? Says on the street. Says on the street. Says on the street. Says on the street. Oh. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lenny.
Yes, sir. I hope
Okay.
you recorded it.
Oh, yes, we recorded it and it was live. And again, look,
Good.
look, brother, we always appreciate it.
It's you and me, but that's all right too.
Yeah,
That's why I say you recorded. That would be good.
no, it's recorded. We got it.
All right.
And we'll make sure we share it with you. And look, again, always a pleasure.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
thank you for sharing your song. I'm sure Leonard appreciates that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's the first one was Leonard Peltier song, very short version, just the first verse. The second song was an American Indian Woman song, the first verse.
Mhm.
In person, I'll sing the whole four verses, but it's a little awkward over the laptop like this.
No worries, no worries. Look, but look again, we appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna sign off.
All right, thank you so much again, Lenny.
Thank you.
And we will, like I said, we'll definitely stay in touch. We're gonna see if we can hopefully we'll see you next year.
Yes.
And we obviously all the best. And you know, be well, stay safe, and I'm
You
so
likewise.
we'll see
Thank
you
you.
soon.
Okay.
All right, thank you, brother.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, take care.